Let me tell you about the real horror of being 23 in this city. It's not serial killers, and it's not walking home alone in the dark. It's rent. When my bank account dipped below $200, I knew I had to get out of my overpriced studio. I spent weeks scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, looking for anything I could afford. That's when I found it. An incredibly spacious, 2-bedroom apartment right in the downtown core. The price? $800 a month. In this economy, that's not a deal. That's a miracle. Or, as I should have realized, a trap. I moved in on a rainy Tuesday. The building was old. Not the charming, exposed brick kind of old. The kind of old that smells permanently of damp wool, boiled cabbage, and dust. The wallpaper in the hallways was peeling, and the fluorescent lights had this constant, sickly yellow flicker. But I didn't care. It was huge, and it was cheap. While unpacking my kitchen, I noticed a single piece of paper stuck to the front of the refrigerator with a cheap plastic magnet. The heading read, Apartment Guidelines. I figured it was standard landlord stuff. Keep the volume down after 10 p.m. Take the trash out on Tuesdays. Do not leave shoes in the hallway. I skimmed through the first 6 rules. But the seventh rule was different. It was written at the very bottom, in thick, jagged, red ink. It looked like whoever wrote it was pressing so hard the pen almost tore the paper. It read, Rule number 7. If the intercom rings at exactly 3:15 a.m., press talk, but do not speak. Listen to the breathing until it stops, then press unlock. Do not pretend you didn't hear it. I laughed out loud. I ripped the paper off the fridge and tossed it in the trash. I figured the previous tenant was just some edgy college kid trying to pull a cheap Halloween prank on the new girl. I wiped down the counters, made a cup of coffee, and set up my laptop. I had a deadline for work, so I put on my noise-canceling headphones and got down to business. I was so deeply focused on my screen that I didn't even notice the time. Until the intercom buzzed. It was a harsh, piercing, mechanical sound. I jumped so hard I spilled my coffee. I ripped my headphones off. The sound was coming from the wall by the front door. It was this old, yellowed plastic box from the 1970s. I glanced at the clock on my laptop. The digital numbers glowed brightly in the dark room, 3:15 a.m. My heart did a weird flutter in my chest. Rule number 7. Okay, very funny, I muttered to myself. I chalked it up to a coincidence. Probably some drunk kids coming back from a bar, randomly mashing buttons on the lobby panel down on the first floor. The rule said, do not pretend you didn't hear it. But honestly, I was exhausted. I wasn't going to play along with a stupid ghost story. I put my headphones back on and stared at my laptop. The intercom went dead silent. I exhaled. See? Just drunk kids. They gave up. Then came the knocks. The sound didn't come from the tiny speaker of the intercom. It came from my front door. Just 10 feet away from me. 3 slow, deliberate, heavy knocks. I couldn't breathe. The lobby downstairs is locked. There's no way someone buzzed the intercom and then made it up 4 flights of stairs in 2 seconds. It was physically impossible. I crept toward the door on my tiptoes, holding my breath. I pressed my eye against the cold brass of the peephole. The hallway outside was completely empty. The yellow lights flickered, casting long, strange shadows across the ugly patterned carpet. Nobody was there. But then, I heard it. It sounded like soaking wet boots. Dragging. Squish. Squish, moving away from my door, fading down the hall. I slammed the deadbolt shut, backed away into my bedroom, and didn't sleep a single wink that night. The next morning, the sun was shining, and everything felt a little less terrifying. Daylight has a way of making you feel stupid for being scared of the dark. I grabbed my travel mug and stepped out into the hallway. There were no wet spots on the carpet. No muddy footprints. Nothing. As I walked toward the elevator, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Gable. She was an elderly woman, probably in her late 70s, wearing a faded cardigan. She was slowly sweeping the hallway floor. Her skin was incredibly pale, almost gray. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'm Chloe, I just moved into 4B. Mrs. Gable stopped sweeping. She didn't look at my face. She looked directly at the dark bags under my eyes. "You didn't press the button last night, did you?" she said. Her voice was flat. Cold. I froze. "Excuse me? How did you?" "It doesn't like being ignored," she interrupted, finally looking up. Her eyes were milky and unblinking. "Read the rules, girl. Or you won't last the month in this building." She turned around, walked into her apartment, and shut the door behind her. That evening, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept racing back to the red ink on that paper. Press talk. Do not speak. Listen to the breathing. By 3 a.m., I was sitting cross-legged on the floor in the pitch dark, directly underneath the intercom box. I was shaking, but I was determined. I was going to prove to myself that this was just some weird electrical glitch. A crossed frequency in the old wiring. I watched the clock on my phone. 3:14. 3:15 a.m. I flinched. My hand was trembling so violently I could barely control it. I reached up and pressed my thumb down on the plastic talk button. I held my breath. For a moment, there was only static. White noise. But then, a voice came through the speaker.
Chloe? Oh my God, Chloe, please. Are you there? Open the door.
My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. It was my mother. But my mother lived 3 states away.
Chloe, please. There's someone behind me. He has a knife. Let me in. Please, baby. I'm so scared.
Tears instantly flooded my eyes. Every instinct in my body, every fiber of my being screamed at me to answer her. To shout, "Mom! I'm here. Hold on." My mouth opened. I drew in a breath to speak. But then, Mrs. Gable's cold voice echoed in my head. "Read the rules. Rule number 7, do not speak." I clamped my hand over my own mouth. I bit down on my fingers so hard I tasted blood, forcing myself to remain completely, utterly silent. Through the speaker, my mother continued to sob and beg.
Why aren't you answering me? He's going to kill me. Let me in.
I squeezed my eyes shut, silently weeping, keeping the button pressed. And then, the crying stopped. It didn't fade away. It cut off instantly. A moment later, a new sound came through the speaker. It wasn't my mother anymore. The voice dropped an octave, distorting into a guttural, demonic, vibrating growl.
You should have said,
"Hello, sweetheart."
Then came the breathing. Wet, heavy, rattling breaths. It sounded like something with lungs full of black tar. I sat there in the dark, tears streaming down my face, listening to this monster breathe into my ear for 10 agonizing seconds. When the breathing finally stopped, I immediately pressed the unlock button. The intercom went dead. I survived the night. But I knew I couldn't stay here alone. The next evening, I called my best friend, Brad. Brad is loud, confident, and chronically addicted to social media. He thinks everything is content. I showed him the intercom. told him about my mom's voice. He just laughed. "Chloe, are you serious?" he said. "You've been watching too much true crime. It's an old building. The wiring is shot. Your brain just panicked and thought it sounded like your mom." "Brad, I swear to God, it knew my name," I pleaded. "Look," he said. "I'll crash on your couch tonight. I'll even set up my tripod. When Casper the Friendly Ghost calls at 3 a.m., I'm gonna record it, post it to TikTok, and we'll go viral." Problem solved. I was too exhausted to argue. Having another human being in the apartment made me feel marginally safer. So, I locked my bedroom door and finally fell into a deep sleep. I woke up with a start. The room was freezing. I grabbed my phone. It was 3:10 a.m. Out in the living room, I could hear Brad whispering to his phone camera. "What's up, guys? We are currently at the haunted apartment. It's 3:14 a.m. Waiting for the demons to slide into our DMs." I threw off the covers. I needed to warn him. I needed to tell him not to speak. But I was too late. Through the wall, I heard Brad walk over to the intercom. I heard him press the button. "Spirits of the deep," Brad said, his voice dripping with arrogant sarcasm. "Who do we have on the line?" He spoke. He broke the rule. A horrific, high-pitched squeal exploded through the apartment. It was so loud it rattled my teeth. Every light in the apartment blew out simultaneously. Plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. For 3 seconds, there was only silence. Then...
Ah! No! Get off me! Chloe, help! Oh my God!
His scream wasn't a joke. It was the sound of a man being torn apart. I grabbed my flashlight, scrambled out of bed, and threw open my bedroom door. The beam of light cut through the dark living room. It was empty. The front door was still deadbolt from the inside. Brad's tripod was knocked over. His phone lay on the floor, the screen completely shattered. But Brad was gone. The police arrived at 8 a.m. They were useless. They told me he probably got spooked and left. They refused to watch the last video file on his broken phone, the one where you could see two impossibly long, pale, multi-jointed hands dragging Brad downward into the solid wall beneath the intercom. I slumped against the wall in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. A door creaked open. It was Mrs. Gable. She stood over me, looking down with those dead, milky eyes. She reached into her pocket and tossed something onto the carpet. A rusty brass key. "It pulls them through the wiring," she whispered. "Down into the basement. Into the boiler room. It likes to play with them first. But you don't have much time." North American apartment basements are naturally terrifying. But this was something else. As I descended the concrete stairs, the air grew freezing cold. The smell of copper, rust, and rotting meat filled my nose. The boiler room was a massive maze of pipes and deep, unnatural shadows. "Brad?" I whispered, aiming my flashlight into the dark. I swept the beam across the room. In the far corner, beside a massive, rusted water tank, a figure was standing. He was facing the solid concrete wall, swaying slightly. It was Brad. Brad. Oh my God. I ran up to him and grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. Brad's head snapped toward me. His mouth was hanging open at an unnatural angle. And from deep inside his throat, came the sound of intercom static. His eyes were gone. They were just solid, pitch-black voids. Black, spiderweb-like veins pulsed up his neck. Brad smiled. The skin around his mouth tore as the smile stretched entirely too wide. When he spoke, it wasn't his voice. It was a choir of overlapping voices. Men, women, children.
You didn't press the button, Chloe.
He lunged at me. He possessed a terrifying, inhuman strength. He grabbed my throat, throwing me backward. I crashed into a pile of metal pipes. I kicked out wildly, my boot connecting with his knee. He didn't even flinch, but he stumbled just enough for me to scramble to my feet. I ran. I ran faster than I have ever run in my life. I scrambled up the concrete stairs on all fours, gasping for air, listening to those heavy, wet, squelching footsteps right behind me. I reached my floor. I banged wildly on Mrs. Gable's door. She opened it, pulled me inside, and slammed the deadbolt shut. I collapsed onto her living room floor, hyperventilating. He's not Brad anymore, I choked out. What is this place? Why did you tell me to follow the rules? Mrs. Gable stood over me. Her expression was completely blank. The rules aren't meant to save you, stupid girl, she said. Her voice sounded strange. Metallic. I looked up at her. What? Do you know why the rent is so cheap? She asked, smiling a dead, empty smile. The landlord needs fresh meat. Young, isolated people. People nobody will look for. Every time you press that unlock button, you're not keeping it out. You're letting a tiny piece of it into the building. You're feeding the wires. My heart stopped. You're in on it. Oh, honey, Mrs. Gable said. I've been feeding it for 40 years. Suddenly, Mrs. Gable's jaw unhinged. Her face began to sag. The skin melted off her skull like hot wax, pooling onto her shoulders. And from her gaping, empty mouth, the deafening buzz of the intercom erupted. I screamed, kicked her backward, scrambled for the door handle, and threw myself back into the hallway. I burst into my own apartment and locked the door. I dragged my heavy wooden dining table and jammed it against the handle. I pushed the couch against the table. I looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. It was coming. The whole building was a trap. The rules were just a way to make us complicit in our own consumption. Tonight, at 3:15, it wouldn't just knock. It would come in. The banging started on my front door. Not just 3 knocks. It sounded like dozens of hands slapping against the wood. Through the door, I heard voices.
Chloe, we're so cold. Chloe, let us in. Chloe, we have to make a video. Press the button, dear.
I covered my ears, screaming. I looked at the old yellow intercom on the wall. The source of the connection. The anchor. I ran to the kitchen, yanked open a drawer, and pulled out a heavy steel meat tenderizer. A massive metal mallet. I walked slowly toward the wall. 3:14 a.m. The banging on the door became deafening. The wood began to splinter and crack. A long, pale, multi-jointed hand burst through the center panel of the door, grasping blindly in the air. I raised the metal mallet high above my head, aiming directly at the plastic intercom box. A voice came through the speaker. But it wasn't a monster. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't Brad. It was my voice. Please don't smash it. If you break it, I die. We die. Please, I don't want to die. I froze. The mallet hovered in the air. Hearing my own voice pleading for life sent a shockwave of absolute psychological paralysis through my brain. It was perfect mimicry. It sounded exactly like my own internal monologue, ripped out and played through a speaker. The pale hand at the door reached the deadbolt. It began to turn it. "Please, put the hammer down." The clock clicked. 3:15 a.m. The deadbolt unlocked with a loud click. The door began to push past the barricade. I closed my eyes. A wave of pure, unfiltered rage washed over my fear. "Shut up," I whispered. And I swung the mallet down with all the strength I had left in my body. I smashed it again. And again. I dropped the mallet, grabbed the exposed, sparking wires with my bare hands, and violently ripped them completely out of the drywall. A scream that didn't belong to this earth vibrated through the floorboards. Every light bulb in my apartment shattered. And then, absolute, ringing silence. I fell to my knees in the dark, gasping for breath, my hands bleeding. I looked at the front door. The pale hand was gone. The voices were gone. The police found Brad in the basement the next morning. He was unconscious, suffering from severe hypothermia, but he was alive. When he woke up in the hospital, he didn't remember anything after midnight. He thought he passed out drunk. I never told him the truth. I just blocked his number. I packed a single suitcase and walked out of that building. I left the furniture. I left the clothes. I never went back. Sometimes, I wonder what happened to whatever was living in the wires. I wonder if breaking the intercom killed it, or just severed its connection to my apartment. But I think I know the answer. Just a few months ago, I was sitting in a coffee shop. I glanced over at the table next to me. A tired-looking college student was scrolling through her laptop. She had a half-empty iced latte and deep bags under her eyes. She was looking at Facebook Marketplace. I caught a glimpse of her screen. There was a listing. Spacious downtown apartment. $800 a month. Must be willing to follow a few simple house rules. I watched her smile. She whispered to herself, "What a steal." And she clicked, "Contact landlord." If you are listening to this. If you are struggling to pay rent. If you find a place that seems too good to be true, and there's a piece of paper taped to the fridge. Please. Don't press the button.